And, it just took a long time before I finally got here with my girls, and it wasn't long ago. And then it's a typical Buffalo thing. Then there's a connection. And then, I met Steven, who's one of the managers here at a charity event for CP. And then here you and I are sitting here talking, and it's great. I mean, the setting is wonderful. And, I'm thrilled that you invited me on.
And we banged out some pretty good chicken wings.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
What did we have? We had medium ciabatta charred. Which I like the flavor on those, kind of like that salty charred taste. Like
definitely, yeah.
And then we had traditional medium barbecue.
Medium barbecue was great. And I was telling you before that just last week, a South Buffalo legend and Kevin Kennedy was back, and we surprised him with his 40th birthday party that we did. And of course, we had Imperial help us out with all the food, and the wings and the pizza were just awesome. And he, being a South Buffalo guy, that's his favorite place. So it all worked out really well.
Yeah. There's a lot to like about this place. And I'm not just saying that because they sponsor the show. I wouldn't endorse a place if I didn't think the food was really good. And just the vibe here too. Nice crowd here.
Nice
By
crowd.
the way, if you're watching us on the video side, I don't know if you're watching on or listening on audio, you wouldn't know this, but we're outside again for a third straight week here at Imperial. Dude, this is
perfect.
Summer weather, man. And
it's not
nice.
ridiculous. No, it's nice. I mean, it was a little breezy earlier, but no, we've got ourselves a perfect night, and Bisons are going to be back in town and rolling this weekend. So it's a good time to be doing this.
Do you get into a lot of the other Buffalo teams besides everyone obviously in association with the Sabres?
Nice little story just before we hopped on. I'm assuming a mother and daughter that were walking out. Girl was about this high. She's like, I love your hoodie. And I'm like, oh, this is great. I mean, the Bandits. So I'm a huge lacrosse guy, have been since I was probably her age. And it's so cool to have now actually seen them win the title in person. Obviously I was witness to the previous four. No, but this year, yeah. And with my youngest daughter, and it was we were all there last year when they lost in the championship game. And so, yeah, the Bandits are huge for me. And obviously, I just think that the longer you're in a place, especially with the passion that exists for the Bills, which you spend a large amount of time talking about,
Sure.
It's impossible not to feel it. And so kind of my running thing after a while, after years of living here, was like, I am a Bills fan, because I really want everybody to be in a good mood on Monday. Like, I'm tired of the malaise, the depression, the disappointment that you come into the office place on Monday. And, but we were also talking about just, the expectations, and when that bar gets raised, like it has for the Bills, and now it's starting to rise for the Sabres, it really reels people in, and you can feel that already as we sit here in mid-July.
Do you, as a sports fan and somebody who follows all the teams, and not necessarily just like the Bills and obviously the Sabres, does it frustrate you a little bit? Like, you take a team like the Bandits, they're literally a championship team.
Yeah.
And sure, when the playoffs roll, and let me say this about their fan base is rabid. It's awesome. You go to those games.
Always has been.
That the fans that are in that arena are awesome.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the casual fan who doesn't pay too much attention to them.
Yeah.
Some media outlets who don't really give them a lot of attention during the regular season until it gets to be the playoffs. It's a little bit frustrating as a fan of these teams sometimes, where there's so much in the. I mean, you understand to an extent why they're in the background, but still, it doesn't make it less frustrating.
Yeah, I think as a lacrosse fan, unfortunately, and I know the greatest legend in Bandits history, John Tavares, would feel the same way. Anybody that's liked lacrosse for a length of time has felt this the entirety of their lives. We always wonder why the game has never kept on going. I mean, when Tavares was the best player in the world in the 90s and the Bandits won 3 times in their early years, like, there was ESPN exposure. But then it went away. And, now you've got an outdoor league in the Premier League with Paul Rabel and his brother running it and getting incredible exposure, but it's still going to take X amount of time, and who knows where it goes. I think it's a fascinating study, though, the lacrosse specifically, as far as what impact live coverage, live mainstream coverage, more daily media coverage, like what it actually could mean for the sport. It's just kind of always sat on the periphery. But I will tell you, one of the cool things about going into Game 3 of the championship this year was the number of people in the plaza and, the surrounding area that were not only looking forward to the night with the Bandits, they were probably because of what the Bills have kind of set the bar at right now. People were already envisioning, like, can you imagine if this is the playoffs for the Sabres? And so it's kind of organic a little bit, but I think what was different for me about that was normally Bandits fans are just locked on the Bandits, and that's fine. That's as in a way as it should be. But at the same time, people are just like, they so want to be excited about everything right now. And that's a really great community feel. So that was kind of like the spinoff of this year's Bandits win, and I loved it.
I'm so glad you said that, because I saw a lot of videos on social media of the party in the plaza going on during the championship. Yeah. And I instantly started thinking back at the day in the Sabres when, oh my God, it was just so much fun being a Sabres fan, and the enthusiasm for everybody, like downtown, would just be insane. What is it about? We're going to get into a bunch of things, but what is it about, like, the actual Bandit Society, the sport of lacrosse, that you like, that excites you?
Well, I grew up in a town that's about 2 hours away from here, east of Toronto, called Whitby, Ontario. And obviously it's produced a lot of terrific NHL players. Wayne Primo, former Sabre, was one of them. But of course, his older brother Keith was the more famous in the family. But Joe Newendike, Gary Roberts, I mean, long list. And Joe and Gary and even Keith, to a certain extent, were great lacrosse players. My cousin back growing up was a huge, really, really good lacrosse player. I actually played a handful of games for the Bandits too. Oh, really? But the town itself is a lacrosse town. And in the old days, so to speak, it was like a handful of communities in Ontario and a handful of communities in British Columbia. And the winner would emerge from each province, and they would slug it out for the national championship, best of 7 series in either junior A or in major series lacrosse. And then all these guys eventually would go on and play pro. So I've been, and honestly, for the diehards, especially the diehard hockey fans who still to this day clamor for more fighting, the amount of fighting that I witnessed as an 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old in the arenas when Whitby was playing Oshawa or Peterborough or eventually Etobicoke or Brampton, like insane. Like police would be called into the arena. There would be fights in the stands. And of course, like, there was no second thought from my parents, like, oh, you want to go to the game tonight? Sure. Like, I'd probably ride my bike down when I like 11 years old, and then I'd be watching mayhem, like absolute mayhem. But so there was always that component, but there's just, I think lacrosse is one of the most graceful, skilled hand-eye sports that there is. And that's why the elite of lacrosse that do play hockey are so gifted. Adam Oates was, I always tell this story, even though Adam didn't play in Whitby. He has the junior A record. He scored 28 points in a single game. Now, when the Whitby team that I was watching, they used to dominate some teams. They'd win like 33-5 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But for one player to have 28 points in a game, like, it's ridiculous. So, and Joe Newendike would have been as good or better a lacrosse player professionally than he was a hockey player. And that's no joke. He was that good. So
before we get into talking about your life and your career let's spend a minute here. I'm going to bring this up. Give 716.
Oh my gosh.
Talk about that. A great thing going on. You know a little bit about it more than I do.
This is year 3. In the last couple of years, we've raised over a couple $1 million. Obviously, it's a huge. It's community. Like, you can't say 716 around here and not feel like it's all inclusive. So the Bills and the Sabres predominantly, and obviously the Bandits are going to have a huge presence this year after winning the championship and just kind of carrying over that momentum. But starting on Sunday night, which of course is the 15th, but at 7:16 p.m., the fundraising starts on Sunday night, and then it goes all the way through to Tuesday morning at 7:16 a.m. So you've got that window of 36 hours, and it's give716.org. And this year alone, 539 local charities, not-for-profits, will benefit from all this effort. And it's online. It's driven by power hours, which feature, like, Sean McDermott and his family have always been a part of this, where for an hour, their family will match, contributions up to a certain amount. But I think what is the most important thing to realize here is that the charities themselves are informed ahead of time, like, hey, we're doing this, would you like to register? It's an opportunity, as opposed to, and I've been a part of not-for-profits before, where you're like cold calling and banging on the door, and like, this is an actual opportunity for them to just simply register. And then as the whole community under this sports umbrella comes together, the trickle-down effect is amazing. Like, it's just, it is spread out. It's like I said, the power hours that happen. Sorry, my page is stuck here. But just as an example, like when I mentioned the McDermotts, like that'll be on Monday at 2 p.m. and they'll match up to $20,000. Wow. So let's just say if like $20,000 comes in that hour, they're matching that. Like, and that's just one example. And obviously we'll kick this off on Sunday night. We have a tremendous long expected, I would say, list of sponsors, because we see these companies time and time and time again be the ones that are at the forefront of stuff like this. So we're super excited. Alumni presence and current presence, I think, from the Bills and the Sabres and the Bandits. And I know my old co-host Brad May is going to be back in town for it, which is pretty great. Marty and I were just joking about him a little bit on the air today, because Brad is the life of the party, so you can't not smile and talk about him whenever his name comes up. And he's just one of them. So it's, you and I were talking earlier about just how social media can have its drawbacks in today's world. This is truly one of those 36-hour windows where social media is absolutely at its best.
Yeah. And by the way, for everyone, it's give716.org.
Yeah.
Go check it out. Lots of
like there's so much incentive, like on certain hours you'll be able to donate and get some lacrosse memorabilia or some Bills memorabilia or Sabres memorabilia, all just for choosing that hour to make your donation. Like, I love it. So you can check it out on the website, and then you can just figure out when or how. And obviously, like anything, there is no amount too small to just get involved in the donation. So
that's great. All right, let me ask you this, Brian. So you mentioned Whitby, growing up in Whitby.
Yep.
Close to Maple Leaf Gardens.
Yep.
Yet, and I read this about you. I do my homework on this show, by the way. You grew up a Buffalo Sabres fan.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Mom is still, to this day, a diehard Sabres fan.
Really?
She's a day oneer. Punch Imlach, Gilbert Perreault, those are the names that I, heard most often as a kid. So, of course, by the time I was in the womb during the first season and then was born immediately upon its conclusion. So, yeah, I definitely have been connected to it all along. And, of course, I kind of adopted all my sports teams back in the day when I was extremely young. And the Sabres were really good, really quick. I mean, 4 years in, they're in the Stanley Cup final. True. You've got the French Connection, the talk of the league.
Yeah.
And then you've got heroic secondary. And I hate even saying it, because Danny Gare, as a league-leading goal scorer in 1980, is not a secondary scorer. But, you get Don Luce and Craig Ramsey and Danny Gare as
motorcycle gangs. This is life.
I know. It's just it was just impossible not to love so many of the characters: Jim Schoenfeld, Jerry Korab, Ben Boxmeer, Housley, all the rest, and Mike Foligno. I mean, it just on and on and on it went. Perreault was my favorite. I can remember doing a I think it was probably 5th grade. Like, when you have to get up in front of the class and you do your little public speaking, your oral presentation.
Yeah.
So mine was on Perreault. Yeah. Easy topic for me, right? Like, I mean, it was, but yeah, like that's just, it's been a part of my life right from the start.
Did you get a lot of shit from friends growing up because you're a Sabres fan?
Yes.
I mean, you grew up in Leaf country.
So here's the thing. The Sabres were always better. Like, look at the Leafs historically under Harold Ballard and his ownership, and like year in, year out. I mean, the Sabres were perennially in the playoffs for the longest time. I mean, one of the highest winning percentages in the NHL of any team that hadn't won the cup, right? So it was pretty easy actually to go through a lot of regular seasons, because as much as they wanted to give me crap, I'm like, yeah, just like, look at the standings. Like, seriously, this is not a hard concept. So,
by the way, it's starting to get, and again, doing this, we're live streaming this if you're watching on the video side of this anyway. starting to fill up here at Imperial Pizza. We got motorcycle clubs going by. You never know what you're going to watch. By the way, apologies. At the very top of this podcast, I noticed after about 30 seconds, I had the sound muted. But anyway, that took care of itself after the first 30 seconds. Okay, so you grew up a Sabres fan.
Yep.
I could get that. You're close to Buffalo anyway, and the Sabres are good. I also learned this. You're a Houston Astros fan.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us how does that happen?
It's probably a little harder to explain. And of course, it was balanced as a kid because Houston was in the National League, Toronto was in the American League.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can imagine, we didn't have a lot of choice as far as what you were getting on television. You were getting the game of the week on NBC with Joe Garagiola and, oh my gosh, Tony Kubek maybe. I mean, there was a long list of great broadcasters, obviously. But I think like the baseball memory for me as a kid was always what preceded the game of the week. And that was This Week in Baseball with Mel Allen. And so that was probably where my fascination with the Astros came, because it was late 70s, again, really young, Nolan Ryan, J.R. Richard. Like, so I can only imagine how many times on This Week in Baseball I would have seen them striking out 10, 12, 15 guys, racking up 300 strikeouts in a year. So Nolan Ryan just became my favorite player. And it took a lot of years before the Astros, after the mid 80s, they had their drop, before they became really good and really relevant again. And then obviously the last decade has been amazing. But I was actually at the first ever World Series game in Houston, which was Game 3, 2005, and
Really?
they lost in 14 innings to the White Sox. And I've since been to multiple World Series since. I was there in 2017, was in Houston in 2019 in Washington, in 21 in Atlanta, and then I did not go last year when they won. But I was in attendance with my good friend from the Sabres, Paul Barker. We went to Game 5 in 2017, which I will always maintain is the greatest, craziest game ever played. The Astros won 13-12 in 10 innings, and it was the most insane roller coaster of a sporting event I've
It's
ever.
stressful if you're a fan of a team.
Well, I know you have some
stadium.
superstitions, and Barks and I may have had some superstitions that unexpectedly came out on that night, as far as like when they got down in the first inning, like 3 or 4-0, I'm like, that's it. I'm going for a walk,
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're watching it from a completely different section. And man, like but the one thing I love about all those meaningful sporting events is, the old saying is like misery loves company, but the joy, the euphoria loves company as well.
Sure.
So if you're going through the tough moments in a sporting event, I always look around and I go, hey, it's not just me. Like, that guy's feeling just as bad as I am right now. But then in the moments where it's awesome, when it's super awesome, like you just feel the sheer joy of people. Like I remember, I was just talking about this the other day, the 07 playoffs against Ottawa. Oh, I'm trying to think of which early series game they won in overtime, but regardless, or scored late and then lost in overtime. But like Danny Briere scored with like 10 seconds left. I turn and hug this lady who was like my mom's age. And and it was like, this is awesome. This is great, And of course I did take my mom to Game 6 in 06 when they won in overtime again. Briere leading to Game 7, the infamous Game 7 against Carolina. But yeah, those are moments like they're unforgettable. Either good or bad, they're unforgettable, but the good is obviously incredible.
Well, you're singing my songs. I'm not an Astros fan, but we're roughly around the same age.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about some of these players, I'm like, holy shit, I grew up remembering these players too. They were great players.
Yeah.
The game of the week, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I still follow baseball, but not with the same passion.
Me too.
That I used to. I don't know why, but it's just the way it is with me.
Yeah.
You mentioned something a few minutes ago, being in 5th grade and having to get up and give a class presentation. Obviously, you go on, you're a broadcaster today. Was that easy for you when you were a kid to be able to publicly speak?
No.
For some people, it's natural. Some people, it's really hard.
No, there are a number of people in Buffalo now that would know that I am not, never have been. I think maybe just now I finally turned a corner. Public speaking was never ever. Even here, like, after all these, I mean, I was 20 years into my career by the time I came to Buffalo.
Right.
And, you get asked to speak at fundraisers or whatever. And I'm just like, just so you know, like, this is not my thing. Like, I'm not super,
Really?
like, I'd rather just look at the camera or be in a radio studio or do a podcast or whatever, because it feels more natural. And I think there's a strange, I've always put it like a strange extra pressure on myself when it comes to public speaking, almost like you have to go beyond what your talking points are. Like, you have to be even more of an entertainer or something to that effect, which is probably unrealistic and totally unnecessary. But I will say this, like, just last week, for example, when the prospects were in town, for the Sabres after the draft, we were asked, Marty and myself and Razor, Danny Gare, Jeff Skinner, and we sat there with the prospects and just did like a kind of a roundtable, like a Q&A a little bit, just a presentation. And it was funny because when I actually walked away from that, not like I haven't done these before, but I felt like it might have been one of the first times where I never overthought, a public kind of presentation. And I was like, oh, that actually was really cool. I love that.
Well, you play it off well. I would have that this was always natural.
No, I'm a bundle of nerves, man. I've always been a bundle of nerves. So
what got you interested initially in wanting to be a broadcaster? Like, do you remember like how old you were? Was there like a
no?
Wait,
sure, I can tell you. I mean, I had no clue what I was doing in life at the end of high school. Yeah. I didn't want to go to college. Like, I didn't want to go 4 more years of school. I was really, really, really not doing well at the end of high school. Was really challenged. I remember meeting with a guidance counselor at the high school. Like, what am I going to do? Like, how are we going to figure this out? And I mean, then at that point, I guess you kind of, you took a few like little quizzes and stuff just to try to steer your education background, interests, what courses you've been successful in, whatever. Actually, I remember distinctly one of the first things that came up was private investigator. I'm like,
really?
Okay, but then in theory, though, like you do have to do some digging and you do have to ask a lot of questions. So then it kind of like, okay, I get this. But honestly, I think the only reason I'm here and I've done what I've done is I've loved sports from my youngest age, and my parents always had sports on in the house. It was always on the radio. It was always on television, in the car, on the back porch, in the kitchen. Like, if the Sabres weren't playing, okay, change the channel. You can put the Leafs game on, just to hear it, just to hear hockey and football and whatever else. Like, it was always on. So I think instinctively you recognize as a observer who the great broadcasters are, right? So then it just becomes, I don't know. I don't even know what it becomes. It's just you're influenced by them. You don't even know it, right? And then I would say early on,
hot take alarm.
Early on in college, I remember I went out to Calgary to go to college, and Ron McLean came and did a little, public speaking day at the college, and I was like, this is amazing. And then years later, I was in studio at Leafs TV, and I was the host, and my 2 guests were Ron McLean and Dave Hodge, who preceded Ron as the host of Hockey Night in Canada, and who would end up being a huge supporter of mine in a really unexpected way. And it's life, man. Like, it's crazy to think back, like my early memories of watching Dave Hodge, and then having, I would say, just as a colleague, someone in the business that if I ever needed something, I could reach out and, get an opinion or some guidance from them. So
one of the things about doing this show and having so many sports media people on over the last 5.5 years or so is learning the different paths that people take to get to ultimately where they are. Like, I've talked to some people, like say Joe Biscaglia, for an example. He was like 5 years old. He knew what he wanted to do. He knew it. And then I'll talk to somebody like Matt Perino, who literally flunked out. You know what I mean? Had no idea what in the world he was going to do with his life.
Wow.
And then now he's covering the Buffalo Bills. Guys are all, and the women are all, you're living your dreams, but just various paths to get there. Now, you mentioned, you worked for a long time before you even got to Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the markets I got it written down before you got to Buffalo. You worked in Calgary,
Mm-hmm.
in Edmonton, in Ottawa, in Toronto. Like, talk a little bit about, got to go through one by one and talk about each single
Yeah.
experience, but just like your experience in working in some different markets and what you learned about the job at the time, and just maybe in life too. What's been leading you to Buffalo?
I think the broad brush answer on that is that, you know how when you hear like, oh, this fan base deserves a winner, or these fans are the most passionate I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Not true. Almost every market I've ever been in, like, it's rabid. Sports fans are rabid. And so I lived, a lot of my Canadian experience was during a troubled financial time for the Canadian teams in Canada, quite frankly. So beyond the hockey, you were almost always dealing with like, where are they going to get the funding for this or the arena? Is it going to happen? Is the team going to move? All that kind of stuff, which at the end of it all, it actually shapes you as a person and as a broadcaster, because you have to have a wider scope than just what's happening on the ice, So for a long time, I wasn't working for a team specifically. I was working for media outlets. My first job in Medicine Hat, Alberta, was for a joint radio and television station. So half the week I'd be reporting on radio, the rest of the time I'd be doing it on television. So it was great balance. And I would say that it's impossible to, if somebody asks, like, how did you get here? I don't think there's an easy way to answer it, other than you always, or often in life, need to have somebody in your corner, someone that believes in you. And for whatever reason, I always seem to have that next person. And a lot of the time, like, it was completely out of the blue. Like, didn't realize that somebody respected my work, wanted to give me an opportunity here, whatever. And I'm just so grateful, so fortunate to have had that. And then now, as you and I have shared almost what our respective ages are, I try to be that same kind of mentor, because the beauty of this business is, whether it's the players you're talking to or your colleagues in the business, they're generally younger, and it keeps you young and it keeps you fresh. And however you can just kind of play a helpful role in it. I love that now. Like I was
it's
so
like a team in a way.
Oh my gosh, I was so fortunate to have so many good people guide me along the way, and it's amazing.
How long did it take you to get confident in what you were doing? You get started with your career. You're second guessing yourself a little bit at times. You might walk into a studio, or you might do an interview or something. You feel great about yourself. You're on top of the world that day, and then the next day something goes wrong, and you're rattled inside your mind, and you're just trying to get through it. Like, was there a point where like you just started to feel confidence in yourself?
Man, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's ever. I guess there are some nights where you don't think about it as much, but just you saying that, like, seriously, the butterflies started for me, because it brings up the tough moments.
Yeah.
And it could have been something as simple as, like, when I was in Edmonton and I'd be doing the afternoon sportscast, right? So I'd be hopping on at like 3:30, 4 o'clock. Well, you could have had 6 good ones, but if you booted one really bad, like, that's all you're thinking about. You're like, oh my gosh, like, I completely failed. I'm going to get thoroughly reviewed for like what happened here. But even then, like, the self-policing that kind of happens through the course of your career, it doesn't have to be like a boss being upset with, you shouldn't have said this or whatever. It's the internalizing of the moments where it's like, oh my gosh, like, I got too nervous here, or I was underprepared here, or overprepared, meaning I just kept talking and talking for no good reason. It's a challenge. You really do have to, but I guess probably because eventually, I mean, I love this place so much, and it was a dream, and people are so respectful. Maybe there is a comfort now where I don't think about it as much. But that being said, like, when the pregame show ends and we've got a 2-minute window, and then when the broadcast starts and I'm the only one on there for like probably 30 to 50 seconds before we break,
right,
I would say I'm still pretty nervous most of those times.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of not like over scripting stuff. So I think that's what adds to my nervousness a little bit at the last second, because I'm like, I don't have a script here. Like, I'm just winging this. Like, obviously I have an idea of what we're going to talk about, But every time, like, I exhale after that minute, and I can't wait for puck drop because I'm like, whew, okay, good. That was good. I'm glad. I'm happy with that. So
I am here live at Imperial Pizza, a vibrant Imperial Pizza. A lot of action going on behind us, by the way, if you are watching the video side. Motorcycles, ambulances, little kids trying to climb up the rail, and I don't know if you even saw that.
I did. I was enjoying it. Yeah.
That's part of fun doing these live streams. You never know what's going to happen. All right, so before the break, let me go this way with you. So we're two dudes having a conversation right now. This just feels really natural, having a podcast. When you're in front of a camera on TV,
yep,
and I want to liken this to, say, a sport. Is there a point like where, like with the good athletes, and when they're good at their sports, it kind of slows down for them a little bit? Like for an example, when I used to do this podcast, until I got more comfortable with it, I used to pace for hours before I'd have, especially if it was a guest on, a pretty notable guest. I would be nervous.
Yeah.
I would pace, and it would just replay my mind. And it was like everything's going through my mind so fast. Like when you're on TV now, there comes a point where, and you admitted, before the break, you still get a little bit nervous at times. Mm-hmm. But just like with sports, like I said, when the game starts to slow down for the athlete, do you feel that way in your mind a little bit mentally? Like when you're on with Marty or you have a guest on, does it slow down for you a little bit in your mind? I think
I'd never thought of it in that context, but yes, you're 100% right. And it comes down to one of the best traits you can have in this business, which is the ability to listen. Yeah. Because if you're paying attention to the person next to you or your guest, that's all you need to worry about. Yeah. Because it's going to fuel the next question. You're invested in it. And when you're invested in it, your audience is likely to be invested in it because they're going to feel your investment in it. And when the producer is in my ear and the producer is clearly invested in it because they're not having to say too much because the conversation is going really, really well and it's impactful. And obviously, I say this, people are probably really tired of me saying this. I am so lucky to work with Marty because he is a dream to just be able to go in any direction with, and he will always have something to say. Yeah. And then on top of it, his personality, his research, his he wants to get stuff right. He's a rule book guy. So like when stuff happens in a game, like he knows, and if he doesn't know, he's going to do the immediate research and man, that brings such a comfort when you're in the position that I'm sitting there.
It has to matter.
Oh my gosh, it's incredible. But that being said, like the number of ex-players, coaches, management types that I have worked with since 1994, basically, all incredibly different, and every single one brings their own unique experience where you just go, oh, I never thought of it that way. And then you just keep learning. And it's the old adage, like every day, it's a new opportunity to learn. And I learn all the time from these guys.
And to use yet another sports analogy, reps matter too.
They do.
Right? Here's what I mean by that. I'm doing the show with you now, and I've been doing this long enough. This used to be a problem of mine. I would be thinking, so I'd ask you a question, and then you start talking, and I'm thinking in my mind, I already know what I'm going to ask you next. But then you say something that really piques my interest. Like, you say something really interesting. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah. Then I'm like, oh, shit, I forgot what I was going to talk about. This is how my mind is processing.
Okay, so I do that all the time.
Yeah.
And my current running joke with our crew on a daily basis on Sabres Live is I miss the obvious. Like, I research and I want to do this. Oh, this is a great little nuance. I want to talk about this. There could be a screaming in red letters headline on a webpage, and I won't see it. And I'm like, so Marty bungled the forest for the trees analogy the other day because of his, English French. Yeah. And I am literally the guy who now can't see the forest for the trees. And I don't know why, but I feel like it's a little bit of a running joke now, so I'm fine with it. So if Tage Thompson scores 50 next year, and that's not my lead story on the post game, you'll know that I've been afflicted with this this inability to secure the major headline. So
you spoke of spending a lot of years in other markets before you got to Buffalo. One thing I want to know that I don't know, I'm looking forward to hearing this from you, is how did you get to Buffalo? How did this opportunity come about for you to get here?
Yeah, well, college in Calgary was 2 years. It was radio first year, TV the second. First job was Medicine Hat, Alberta. I mentioned radio and television. My big break was going to Edmonton to work Oilers pregame on radio. And when you asked about my nerves earlier, this is no word of a lie. I drove from Medicine Hat to Edmonton, went in for the interview, was so nervous, completely bombed the interview, like completely destroyed any confidence I had in myself at the time. My future boss at the time said, don't worry about it. Go back to Medicine Hat, air check your newscast tomorrow, send it to me. We'll go from there.
Wow.
I did. He gave me the biggest break of all time, and I'm forever indebted. Unfortunately, Mike passed away a year after that as I was getting my feet wet in a bigger market. And I still don't know where my career would have been if he had not taken that chance on me. And then Toronto, I was at the Fan for a while, which is an incredible group of guys. And you know, we were all really, really young, and, you know, a lot of us stayed in the business for a long time. It's pretty crazy thinking back to it. And then, I worked on Ottawa. We launched a new radio station up there, and I felt like I was on the air all the time.
Really?
Oh yeah, we had marathon pregame shows and postgame shows, and then history repeated itself. I went to Toronto, worked at Leafs TV when it launched, and we had marathon pregame and postgame shows. And so I got a lot of reps. To your point, like there was a time at Leafs TV where I was hosting like 8 different shows a week. Wow. Between pre and post and this and that, and half an hour sit down shows, you know, in conversation with people. But the reps just kept on coming. And then I was lucky to get onto NHL Network 2007. And then that was another huge break, because that was when it launched here in the US, and just kind of increased the exposure, made more connections with people. And then the opportunity came up here, and I'm forever grateful. But because we're talking about this, I do want to say one of the coolest things that ever happened to me was we were traveling in Buffalo, or we were in Philadelphia with the Sabres one night, let's say around 2014-15. I got an email from a college professor of mine. She said, I was cleaning out my office and I stumbled upon this card. It was a thank you card that you wrote for me after second year. And it said a lot of things, but the punchline is, I said to her, hopefully someday I can repay you by working for the Buffalo Sabres.
Really?
And I opened up this email, and Mayday is sitting next to me, and I'm like, dude, you're not going to believe this email.
Wow.
And like, there we are sitting up in the press box in Philadelphia covering the Sabres, and she sends me this. I'm like, whoo, this is pretty great.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's awesome.
So I love that, you know. It was just like, because you asked earlier about like, did you know all along or whatever? And you don't. Like, I didn't know until I was 19 or 20. And then people are teaching you kind of the ins and outs of what it could be like. And they're telling you all the crap, like terrible hours, high divorce rate, no friends, because your hours are completely different than everybody else's. They're like, you're working nights and weekends. Everybody else is having fun on nights and weekends. You're working, right? So it's a grind, but it's everything they told me it would be, and I'm incredibly blessed.
Talk about, and we kind of weave Marty in and out of this conversation. Let's focus on that for a second. Talk about your relationship with him. Marty is I'm talking about Marty Braun.
Man of the people.
Yeah, man of the people. He was a popular player, which, by the way, is funny because he's been doing this for a while now. And just like, say, Eric Wood on the football side, starting to see younger and younger fans who are just getting into the teams start to know Marty now more for TV than they do as a player. Just like Eric. Like, Eric's, he's the radio guy with the Buffalo Bills.
Yes.
Eric played 9 years for the Bills, was an all-pro center. But anyway, kind of same deal with Marty, popular player. But anyway, talk about the chemistry that you guys have, because I'm going to tell you this straight up, man. You cannot fake chemistry. People try. You see it all the time. I see many, whether it's a TV show or a podcast or radio shows. Some people just don't have it. They don't have that chemistry. Try as you may, people see through that shit. I just that's my personal opinion. I know I do. Anyway, you guys have chemistry.
Yeah.
You can tell. It's authentic. It's not forced. You guys seem to really enjoy each other, whether it's in the studio together, whether it's, remotely when you guys are doing the show. Just talk about Marty and the relationship you guys have formed and the chemistry that you have, because that matters, man.
It does. I would say this. I can't talk about Marty without talking about every step since I've joined the Sabres. Like, I wouldn't be as comfortable on air today with Marty if it wasn't for Danny Gare. Like, when I started and Kevin was doing the play-by-play and Danny was doing the color and Danny would join me on the intermission, like, he made me feel, to your team analogy earlier, he made me feel like part of the team, like nothing I had experienced before. So, and then of course, when I became full-time, then I was with Roby for the last few years of his career. Yeah. Again, like, Mike's ability to boost my confidence, to put faith in me, like, hey, you're doing this right, meant the world to me and still means the world to me. And then, oh my gosh, like Mayday and I had actually worked together at NHL Network at different times. And we actually had stood in the parking lot at NHL Network one time and said, wouldn't it be cool working in Buffalo together? And then we did.
Then you did.
And we laughed about it for the first year or two when we were together. And Brad and I had chemistry for sure. But then Marty, because of what you said, like, he'd already established himself as a broadcaster, but then he wanted, I think, he wants to get better all the time. He is anything that's on your computer screen. It could be entertainment related. It could be wildlife. It could be geography. Like, he wants to know the answer. Yeah. So it's fascinating to work with someone who's as passionate to learn about things. And I'm grateful and appreciative that you said what you said, because as much as I can still get a little nervous or wound up before a show. Once we actually start, the comfort is incredible, because I know he's got my back. I don't even want to say he's got my back. Like, that's the wrong thing to say. Like, you're not gonna, as hopefully no one's dying, right, during the course of the show. Like, I mean, I don't need you to have my back. But you know what I mean, right? Like, it's just, yeah.
Well, to your credit, and I'm not just saying this because you're sitting next to me and we're doing the show right now, but if you say that you still get nervous from time to time, I certainly believe you.
Yeah.
What I'm telling you is that it doesn't feel that way when you're watching.
Yeah.
So credit to you for that. And like I said, I really enjoy the chemistry that you and Marty have going on right now. It makes watching the show much more fun, and especially, quite frankly, for a team that until recently, you know, is not very entertaining.
Right.
There'd be times where the post game, the pre-game might be more fun than the game itself.
Yeah, and that's where, you benefit from those around you, the production. I mean, the one thing that you're always reminded of when the team doesn't win is how it affects every single person that is trying to market, sell tickets, produce content, whatever. Every single person in the organization feels a lack of success. Sure. That's why this emergence is the best thing to feel around the office place, right? Like, every single department, you can feel hope again. And that's a wonderful thing to be around. And I love it, just from our producer, Joe Pinner, who we worked with forever. Like, it's always nice to even just hear it you can hear it. Like, we're about to talk. Hey, this is next. He may not know this, but I can hear the difference in his excitement level for any little thing that we're talking about. It's pretty great.
What's the difference? Well, I don't even want to ask you what the difference is. We all know what the difference is. How does it feel to be? And again, you're a very engaging person. Whether you'll talk to somebody, whether it's here at the bar at Imperial Pizza, or whether it's on Twitter, whatever it may be, you get asked about the Sabres all the time. How does it feel right now to have people speak to you in a tone where it does feel
strange?
Sure, you're starting to feel the enthusiasm now. You're starting to, not even you feeling it, you're starting to sense it from other people when they're talking to you. I'm asking you a Sabres question with some enthusiasm and some excitement, and I'm sure a lot of fans are doing that. I'm sure you notice that now. Like, the tone has changed when people will come up to you and start talking to you about the team.
My honest answer, I feel guilty, because I'm trying to be measured through all of this. I don't want to be the hype guy. Right. Like, we're all seeing what we're seeing.
Sure.
But I'm not going to be like, guaranteed this and they're going to do this, so I'm trying to be the measured guy. So I sometimes walk away from these casual conversations like, maybe I should have been a little more excited, but I'm more content just to listen to people share their excitement. we talk for a living. Like I don't need to be the one talking in this. Like if you want to come up and talk about why you're excited, I'm all ears. Like I want to hear that. That's why we're in the arena. That's why we're doing what we're doing, right? So
you grew up a Sabres fan.
Yeah, so I know it. I mean,
but
I live it.
Like, you know what it feels like to have excitement for a team. And
I live it for my mother, who's now in her 80s.
Right.
Like, I want her to really great games. Like that's the best part. And I still get a huge kick out of, like, they're up in Canada, so they don't always get our feed for the games. Sometimes they, whatever, get the visiting feed or a national feed or whatever. And it's still a great rush for me, either before the game or after the game, when I get an email or a text from my mom. Yeah. Got to see you tonight, and it's like, it's pretty cool. It's super rewarding.
Without deep diving into the team itself right now, because I wanted to have you on the show tonight to kind of just talk to you and talk about your life and your career and some feelings about some things. But again, without deep diving into the team, this is a good time to be a Sabres fan. And does it feel to you like expectations? I don't want to necessarily say if you don't make the playoffs, it's automatically a bust, because there's lots of variables that can happen. Injuries, things could, Jack Quinn already is just one. Hopefully the other one, but you know what I'm saying. But do you feel like right now the expectations that are starting to be bestowed upon the Sabres, a lot of national people are starting to really kind of get on board, calling this an up-and-coming team? You feel like that's a justified expectation right now. Yeah. And it's reasonable, not necessarily, hey, playoffs or this season sucked, but it's reasonable for me to say, Ryan, I think this team should make the playoffs next year.
I agree. I don't think there's any reason not to think that way. The one thing, like, to go back to conversations with enthusiastic people, it's not that I'm ever sitting there painting a contrary opinion to what I think the Sabres are. My mindset is always like, okay, but just remember the other teams that are in the hunt. Yeah. Because so that's where my variables are often connected to. Like, okay, if I'm looking at this season upcoming realistically, Boston is not going to repeat as a record-setting regular season team. You could subtract 20 points off of their standings last year, and they might still win the division. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's cool, because then those 20 points are getting spread out somewhere else. Are we grabbing them? Is Detroit? Right. Is Ottawa? Even if Montreal and Philly aren't great teams, are they going to be the same or better? So it's all a case of just how congested it becomes. And we saw that ultimate congestion at the end of last year when you missed by 1 point, technically 2, just to get into the playoffs. Pittsburgh's not rolling over with a new GM and an aging Crosby and Malkin. They're going for it. They're going to keep going for it. They missed the playoffs last year. We haven't said that since 2006. Yeah. So Pittsburgh's not going to disappear. Washington is not going to ride out Ovechkin's remaining years trying to be bad. Right. You know what I mean? So, and these are teams that didn't make it. And the Islanders are just the Islanders. And as much as nobody likes watching them, they're still a team capable of making the playoffs. Yeah, sure. So you can't just punt these teams out of the equation. That's my concern. That's all.
That's a great point, because sure, can the Sabres make the playoffs? Yes. All right. Well, then who's not making? Yeah. And they got to be better than all the
Marty
teams.
Had the audacity to quiz me on this the other day, like about what teams could miss. And he's like, there's one more. And I'm like, Toronto? And he's like, no, Boston. And I'm like, you're telling me Boston could fall but you know what? Like, if Bergeron doesn't come back, and then you look at how they look, and will they, like, there are no guarantees, right? But what an unbelievable turn of events that would be if one of these spots opens up, and it's like someone from the Boston or the Tampa realm of what we have seen in the Eastern Conference for so long.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's a loaded conference. It really is. Loaded. There's a lot of good teams. There's good teams besides Buffalo that didn't make the playoffs, and you highlighted a couple of them. Before we get out of here, a couple more things. Talk about Buffalo. All right, so I had Howard Simon on not too long ago. Now, Howard, like you, is not from Buffalo. He didn't grow up in Buffalo. You would never know that, though. And what I mean is this. Everyone calls him. Howard Simon is a Buffalonian. Mm-hmm. You are a Buffalonian. You grew up a Sabres fan. You've been here. You live here. You work here. You're a Buffalonian. What about it? What about this city living here now and all that endears you the most? Like, talk to him, because we were talking over wings here. Talk to him again. I went to Florida for 5 years, and I really went during those 5 years, and I lived in Buffalo my whole life before that. I think I took it for granted how special the city is in some ways anyway, how special the city is. And when I went away, I miss it. I came back and now I don't take that stuff for granted anymore. But just how about this city? Like, how is it endearing to you?
Well, there's two sides to it, of course. The impatient side of me that just wants the city to grow quicker, provide more jobs for people, provide even more confidence in what I thought we were really hitting our stride to a certain extent before COVID, and then COVID really delayed, and not just here, obviously, but I do think we were feeling a resurgence in our community, and then it stopped for so many reasons. And so I feel like that train is still a little slow to leave the station right now, especially when you travel around and you look at development in other cities. So that's a little frustrating, but the only reason that it's frustrating is because I care so much, because I've now been here so long. And I was able to have those caring connections with people right from the start. And I know anybody has known me from the first time I hopped on the air here, like my arrival basically coincided with a very high profile tragedy when Alex Rice was a skateboarder who was killed, while riding her longboard. And it was a very high profile case involving, driving under the influence. And I ended up getting involved in a not-for-profit that we created in Alex's name to build a skate park for her in her honor, in her memory, at the Northtown Center. And it took 7 years, but in August of 2018, we got it built. And the only reason that I'm sitting here saying this 5 years later is I can't separate that. If you ask me about Buffalo, that's what Buffalo means to me, is that every year we did grassroots fundraisers. And every year, more and more, some the same, but more and more different people came out, and they would give whatever they had, $10, $20. Hey, this is a tragedy. I just want to help. And like that is Buffalo. And that's why, as fitting as how we started the show, like that's why this whole Give 716 weekend that kicks off Sunday night, that's why it's important. Like, that's what I think of when I think of Buffalo. And it gets highlighted this weekend, which I'm so grateful to be a part of that. To at least feel like in some small way, by me doing my job and promoting it, somehow some organization is going to get a few extra dollars to try to do their thing. And their thing is so impactful. Like I said earlier, 539. Would anybody know that there's even 500 plus not-for-profits in our community? It would be hard to know that, right? But that's how much people actually need help always. And it can't be just around the 16th of July, right? Like, this is an ongoing thing. And I feel like we're good at that, but like anything in life, we can always find a way to help more.
I tell you, I think you said it perfect. A lot of people will say the greatest thing about Buffalo is food. And don't get me wrong, it's good. And again, when you live somewhere else, you would know that. Yeah. You don't take it for granted if you're somewhere else. But to your point, whether it's Give 716 or whether it's community places like this, and this is my single favorite thing about Buffalo, honestly, God, I'm not just talking about Imperial, because there's endless places that do good. But like, my favorite thing about this place, as much as I love the food, all the other stuff, and I've seen it firsthand, they give back all the time. They give to the community all the time, whether it's Little League baseball, whether it's time in high school basketball, whether it's somebody's in a bad way and it's their fundraiser. There's just so many things. And again, not just Imperial Pizza, just tons of places around that. And that's just how it is in Buffalo.
Yeah.
If little Johnny is playing travel baseball and you're putting together a fundraiser or a beer blast, and you live in South Buffalo, that community's coming out. Yeah. They're coming to your fundraiser, beer blast, whatever it is that you have. That's always been like my favorite thing, about this city. And it's not perfect, city of good neighbors. It is a city of good neighbors. There's a couple bad apples like you would find anywhere. Last question, then I'll let you go. Like, we talk about your life and your career, obviously, some Sabres and stuff, but like, now at your age, we're not young, we're not old, we're like in that middle. Like, what are some of the things that when you do have some downtime and you're
Yeah.
not at work,
Mhm.
what are just some things that you like enjoy doing, whether it's around town or traveling?
Yeah.
What do you like to get after when you come?
Spontaneity is probably like the one word that would get attached to me, because and it happened this week. The show ended at 1:00, and I had it in my mind like, we could maybe do this. And by 2:00, I was out of my place. I was on a 7-hour drive to Kalamazoo, Michigan, where I had not been before. I had booked a hotel, I had bought a concert ticket, and I went and saw an artist that I really like, who was obviously not going to be in the immediate area, which is why I drove 7 hours to go see him. But then it turned into like the perfect job-related trip, because on the way out of Kalamazoo, I stopped in Plymouth, Michigan, connected with Amerks coach Seth Appert. That's where the National Team Development Program is based out of, where he worked before. He took me on a tour. I did the show from there that day. And then afterwards, I'm like, Seth, I'm taking you out for lunch because of all the things you've helped me with. So I spent an afternoon in Plymouth just chatting hockey with the Amerks coach after spending time at the development. Like, you have to live, right? Like you gotta, don't be afraid to just, if you're able to, and I get it. Like I'm really, 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 really lucky to be able to just do that for a number of reasons. But I also think that my girls, who actually really, really love it here at Imperial, at their ages of 18 and 16, anything that we do matters to me, and I cherish it.
Sure.
But I also love kind of showing that spontaneous side to them too, that, you know what, sometimes in life, if you feel like you can just go on a 3-hour drive just to clear your head, maybe get some enjoyment out of it, watching theater or music or sports, it doesn't matter. Just kind of follow what's driving your passion for that day. And I'm really lucky. I go to a lot of concerts.
What kind of music are you into most?
I'm all over the place. I mean, Taylor Swift was a huge highlight in May. I went down to Nashville. My buddy Kevin.
Wait, what? You went to see Taylor Swift?
I did. I was at the Rain show in Nashville where it was almost canceled, and she came on at 10 after 10 and played till 1:30 in the morning. No joke. Like, craziest experience, best probably concert I've ever seen, simply because of what she and her crew went through to deliver what is her promise, which is to always deliver the best show. She is meticulous. Like, professional doesn't even begin to describe how good she is. And then the talent is otherworldly. But, I saw Springsteen for the first time this year. Tommy Prine is who I went to see in Kalamazoo. Tommy is the son of the legendary John Prine, who passed away at the start of COVID, who I've just gotten into. And the only reason that I got into Tommy Prine is because Rustin Kelly has become like his mentor and kind of big brother and produced Tommy's album. And I'm a huge Rustin fan. And like, speaking of spontaneity, like when the season ended this year, I went and saw Rustin in 4 different places in a 10-day span: Asbury Park, New York City, Cleveland, and Chicago.
Wow.
And why? I don't know. Like, why? Like, it's a valid question. Why would I do that? But I loved every moment. I mean,
it's living your best life when you get to do stuff like that.
But it's like Americana. I love a good pop song, so that's why I love Taylor. I mean, she's way more diverse than pop, obviously, but you get what I'm saying. I was a heavy metal guy. I was a classic rock guy. I was a grunge guy. I was a pop punk guy. I'm an emo punk guy. Like, I love it all, and I'm grateful because I now soak it in through my girls, and it doesn't matter. It's like, if I see them liking something, I'm like, yeah, I'll listen to it. I want to know. I want to feel what you feel when you hear this music.
I'm not saying this. I mean this. I am legitimately jealous that you went to see Taylor Swift live. Like, legit jealous.
Again, it all comes back to Kevin Kennedy, the South Buffalo legend. I wouldn't have got there if he had no joke. So this was November, maybe, when the tour was being announced and the tickets were going on sale. And I was sitting on the set about to do the pregame for the Sabres. Kevin is in Nashville now, and he texted me. He's like, I got 2 tickets to Taylor. Would you like to go? By the time the first intermission rolled around, I had booked my flight to Nashville. I had Venmo'd him the money for the ticket, and I couldn't wait to get like, oh, this is going to be amazing. And then 5 months later, it just happened to fall on my birthday. down in Nashville. So we had a birthday weekend. It was a blast.
I'll tell you right now, I figured talking about your life and your career and getting to know you for this show would be fun. I did not envision when we were sitting there having wings for the show that the highlight for me anyway would end up being a Taylor Swift concert story.
Trust me, my girls are not thrilled that they were not there, and I was.
You know what? I can't think of a better way to end the show.
Yeah.
And talk about a Taylor Swift concert. One more time here live at Imperial Pizza, 1035 Abbott in South Buffalo. Get out here. If you've never been here, get some food. You know the portions are deep. So
they're deep.
You know they're deep.
That is the best way to put it.
Probably going to have leftovers. Great place. Check it out. And one more time, I want to say give716.org.
Yeah.
Go check that out.
All starts on Sunday night. We're going to have our launch party at 5:30 in the afternoon. And then at 7:16 p.m. is when the campaign begins.
And follow this fine young man on Twitter at Duffer Sabres. Brian Duff, everyone. It's been fun, buddy. Thank you very much.
It's been great.
Man.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, guys. I'll talk to you. Brand new shows coming up soon.